My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to 106.7 Wilmington's Big Talker. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. Now, in case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of volunteers from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. By now you have probably heard that last week, for the first time in decades, the United States House of Representatives passed gun control legislation. What you have probably not heard, however, is about the change in political dynamics which made that passage possible, and what that means for the future of the gun rights movement. More on all of that shortly. But first, in gun rights news, Kentucky is poised to be the 16th state to adopt some form of permitless concealed carry as the permitless concealed carry movement continues to sweep across the country. Last week, permitless carry became the law in Oklahoma, making that the 15th state to pass some form of the law, which also goes by the popular name constitutional carry. Now in Kentucky, Governor Matt Bevin says he will sign the bill which recently passed the Kentucky State House by a 60-37 vote. Meanwhile, naysayers continue to oppose permitless carry laws. In Oklahoma, Oklahoma City Police Chief Bill City denounced the law as going in the, quote, wrong direction, just as Michael Bloomberg's anti-gun AstroTurf group, calling itself Moms Demand Action, unsuccessfully protested passage of the bill. In Kentucky, the bill was opposed unsuccessfully by the Fraternal Order of Police. You will recall in North Carolina that in the last session of the General Assembly, the Senate failed to pass House Bill 746, which had passed the House for permitless carry. The bill has happily been reintroduced as House Bill 61 by Representative Larry Pittman of Cabarrus County. I encourage you to contact your North Carolina House representative and also Speaker Tim Moore and tell them to support HB 61. Now, in case you are the last gun owner to have any doubts about what the Democrats have in mind for you, the United States House, under the control of Democrat Speaker Nancy Pelosi, this week should have dispelled those doubts. The House didn't just debate gun control. They gave two gun control bills the bum's rush, passing 2 gun bills in as many days. The bills were H.R. 8 for so-called universal background checks and H.R. 1112 to close what they call the Charleston loophole by allowing the FBI to further delay background checks under the existing National Instant Background Check System, known as NICS. Now, you might be saying, well, that's no big deal, but let me assure you that it is a very big deal. H.R. 8 is intended to create the rudiments of a national gun registration system. Why do they want to do that? Because you can't ban what you can't find. More on this later. Meanwhile, H.R. 1112 will have the practical effect of allowing the FBI to shut down gun purchases because it allows indefinite delays. Forget about the supposed 10-day provision that we'll talk about shortly. or the 3-day provision now. Unlike now, the transfer will not be able to proceed after 10 days without FBI approval. But you say, now it goes to the Senate, and the Senate won't pass them, right? The Senate will stand in the way of gun control. Well, are you really so sure about that? In 2013, the United States Senate voted for cloture, that is a motion to debate a bill, requiring not 50 but 60 votes, for a bill called S-649, which was virtually the same bill as H.R. 8, a universal background checks bill. Moreover, as we will discuss later, our own Senator Richard Burr voted for cloture, that is, to debate the bill rather than simply killing it. That after signing on to a letter authorized by Senators Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Mike Lee saying they would not vote for cloture. Burr changed his mind and voted for cloture, making it possible for anti-gun politicians to debate the bill and very nearly making it law. I know all this because Vernon Robinson and I put a demonstration in front of his district office in Winston-Salem that allowed a few dozen angry voters an opportunity for a redress of grievances with their United States Senator. I'm afraid I've not been on Senator Burr's favorites list ever since then. The point is that rhinos, that means Republicans in name only, by the way, are forever looking for a way to be reasonable on gun control. And I can also assure you that from experience I will describe later, I know that Thom Tillis, our other U.S. Senator, is no friend of gun owners. Moreover, regardless of how bad you think H.R. 8 and H.R. 1112 are, understand that the Democrats are not done yet. Like the Brady Act of 1993, which paved the way for the so-called assault weapon ban of 1994, these two bills are designed to clear a path for still more gun control by creating political momentum. We will discuss all this later, and particularly now that the Democrats have already announced that they will seek more gun control. Let's talk about H.R. 1112 first. The bill passed by 228 to 198 with 3 Republican defectors voting for gun control and 7 Democrats voting against. I'm happy to say that there were no Republican defectors from North Carolina, but of course our perennial gun ban advocates Alma Adams, G.K. Butterfield, and David Price voted for the bill and against your rights. And of course, we lacked 2 Republican votes, since unfortunately Walter Jones recently passed away in office, and of course the leftists have succeeded in overturning the results of the 9th congressional race last year and are now busy trying to install anti-gun Democrat Dan McCready in a revote, which will come at some as yet determined date. Notes the publication The Hill. The legislation, H.R. 1112, was spearheaded by House Majority Whip James Clyburn, Democrat of South Carolina, Representative Joe Cunningham, Democrat, South Carolina, and Representative Pete King, Republican of New York, and would lengthen the initial review period for background checks from 3 to 10 days. Following the 10-day period, gun buyers could request a meaningless, quote, escalated review to spur the FBI to complete its investigation if the background check isn't completed. If the background check remains incomplete after that period, supposedly the purchase can be completed, but that remains to be seen. Proponents of the bill say it's needed to close the so-called Charleston loophole, arguing that the current 3-day waiting period allowed the shooter at the Emmanuel AME Church massacre to obtain his weapon. Now let's take a look at H.R. 8. If passed, this bill would require all transfers of firearms to be conducted through federally licensed dealers. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Indeed, that reasonable-sounding patina is why a large portion of the general public supports the concept of so-called universal background checks. But like all gun control, the devil is in the details. Details which are designed to make it so difficult to own guns that most people will eventually just give up. I'll bite. We will talk about the impracticalities of the bill first and the hurdles it will create, but it's important to remember that the details of the bill are less important than its overarching intent, which we will discuss shortly, and it ain't pretty. H.R. 8 passed with 8 Republican defections, none from North Carolina, and only 2 Democrats voting against the bill. In our next segment, we will talk about that near unanimity among the Democrats for gun control. Right now, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. After a short break, we will return with still more information to better enable you to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. In case you're just joining us, we are talking about the passage of 2 gun control bills last week in the U.S. House and what that means for the changing political dynamics of gun control in Congress and for gun owners as a result. Back to H.R. 8 for so-called universal background checks that again passed last week. In the House, it may be stopped in the Senate, provided you do your homework. Once again, the bill would require all transfers of firearms, be they sales or gifts, to be done through federally licensed dealers or FFLs. Nothing in the bill stipulates what FFLs could charge for that service, nor whether any would do so at all. It is perfectly plausible that few, if any, dealers would take responsibility for a transfer on which they aren't even making a profit. And those that do will probably charge a handsome sum for transfers, significantly increasing the cost of buying a gun, potentially to the point of making it impossible for people with limited incomes. Now, advocates for the bill will tell you all sorts of lovely things about how gifts between immediate family members are exempted, or as are people passing a gun from one person to the other at a shooting range or during a hunting trip. Indeed, unlike previous versions of background check bills, the sponsors carved out additional areas where it would not apply. Why? Well, to get the nose of the camel under the tent. And rest assured that if H.R. 8 becomes law, the rest of the camel will soon follow, as the Democrats begin, in their words, closing loopholes in the bill by expanding the gun transfers covered. And even now, if friends come over and want to check out your gun collection, reaching into your gun safe and handing one of your guns to a friend to check out will make you a federal felon, punishable by 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. But all of that pales beside the actual intent of the bill. Gun control advocates have spent decades trying to create a national gun registry. And as I noted earlier, the reason for creating a national gun registry is that they can't ban what they can't find. Ignoring other countries where gun registration has invariably led to confiscation, ask the folks in California who registered so-called assault weapons, later found not to comply with new regulations, or ask the people of New York who, after passage of the misnamed SAFE Act, were deemed to be mentally unfit and had sheriffs show up at their door to confiscate their guns. But you say, the National Instant Check System, or NICS, isn't a gun registration system. In fact, federal law prohibits registering guns. Well, anybody who says NICS cannot be used as a gun registration system should understand that it already has been. The Brady Act, passed in 1993, created a 5-day waiting period for gun purchases, which, with NRA support, sunsetted once the computerized National Instant Background Check System, or NICS, was created. Under the Brady Act, Once the FBI completed a background check, the transaction record for that check was supposed to be expunged from the system within a certain period of time. I think it was 72 hours, but I'm not certain of that. But that was before Clinton's Attorney General, Janet Reno, stepped in and refused to expunge transaction records as required by law, claiming they were being used for audit purposes and thereby creating a de facto gun registration system. A lawsuit was unsuccessful in dislodging the Clinton-Reno gun registry, and it was only reversed with the election of George W. Bush when his Attorney General, John Ashcroft, discontinued the practice. This is not conspiracy stuff, it's simple fact. And it is the reason that Democrats want to capture all gun transfers, including private sales, through NICS, for that future day when NICS can be properly used to register all guns, after which I can assure you they will inevitably begin efforts to round up what they have registered. The passage of H.R. 8 and H.R. 1112 in the U.S. House means that the political dynamics of gun control, particularly within the Democrat Party, they are a-changin'. After suffering defeats in 1994 and 2000 for supporting gun control, namely the Republican Revolution of 1994 and the defeat of Al Gore in 2000, Democrats in the early 2000s were loath to claim support for gun control. They didn't even like to use the words gun control. It became their strategy to disguise gun control. In fact, Americans for Gun Safety, an organization, was created precisely to camouflage Democrats' anti-gun stances. And this organization was created by billionaire Andrew McKelvey, precisely for the point of disguising gun control. And gun safety became the watchword, from safety experts, of course, who didn't know which end of the gun spits out a bullet. Indeed, the last major dalliance in Congress on gun control was in 2013, when the U.S. Senate voted to debate S-649, the so-called Universal Background Checks bill we discussed earlier. But that was then, and this is now. And the political dynamics have changed. Democrats have now shed their camouflage and are now in full-throated roar for gun bans. Why, you ask? Well, the Christian Science Monitor did an excellent analysis of this in a piece entitled, "As Party Shifts Left, Democrats Show New Unity on Guns." Beyond the usual polling, which claims the public supports background checks, without knowing the details, of course, the article raises an interesting point about the demographics of Democrat Party support. To wit, and I quote, "On Thursday, the House also voted to extend the review period for background checks. This bill's passage underscores the evolution of gun control in Washington since its heyday in the early 1990s. That's when President Bill Clinton signed a ban on assault weapons and a background check measure that only applied to federally licensed dealers. Many rural and southern Democrats voted against both measures, and the party paid a stiff price at the ballot box, with Republicans seizing control of Congress in 1994. Even after the Democrats regained a majority in 2006, they shied away from pressing for new gun control measures. Today, however, Democrats are emboldened and unified, moving with public opinion. The drumbeat of periodic mass shootings, overwhelming public support for expanded background checks, and revved-up activism by voters and organizations all factor into the Democratic consensus on this issue. Their retaking of the House has given them the power to act on that consensus, as does their current geographic makeup. Compared with the 1990s or even the early 2000s, and I want you to listen to this, House Democrats today are far less dependent on districts with large numbers of culturally conservative blue-collar and rural voters, notes Ronald Brownstein, senior political analyst for CNN. Instead, he writes, they're centered on urban and suburban districts supportive of more gun regulation. In essence, the congressional electoral map aligns neatly with the gun regulation agenda. Now, translated, that means urban demographics are now driving an agenda toward banning guns, as the Democrats have shifted not from being the party of the blue-collar Americans now to the party of the liberal elites and the urbanites. I want you to remember that the next time somebody touts eliminating the Electoral College or suggests legislation that our state give up its electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote nationally, as, by the way, Colorado is now doing. Because what those proposals will mean is that places like New York and California will now run the show, bringing with them the leftism that has already destroyed their states. Think about that. Right now, we're going to take a short break, after which we will return to more on the political dynamics which are making gun control a viable issue for the first time in more than 2 decades and unifying the Democratic Party against gun rights. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. After our short break, we will return with more on the political dynamics of gun control and what that will mean to you in the future. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. In case you are just joining us, we have been talking about the change in political dynamics which have unified the Democrat Party against gun rights and made the issue politically viable for the first time in more than 2 decades, including the fact that all declared Democrat candidates in the presidential race thus far are virulently anti-gun. Now, for the first time ever, and thanks largely to anti-gun zealot and billionaire Michael Bloomberg, gun control spending outpaced that for gun rights organizations in the 2018 elections, says the publication Roll Call. And I quote, "Spending from gun control groups outpaced spending from gun rights groups during the midterms, according to OpenSecrets.org. Everytown for Gun Safety Action Fund, for example, spent $30 million on the races up and down the ballot last cycle. The gun safety organization, it's not a gun safety organization, it's a gun control organization anyways, is spending $400,000 on digital ads touting the background check legislation, and it's planning additional advertising to hold lawmakers accountable for their votes. Think about that. On the topic of urban demographics, Roll Call goes on to note that of the 5 Republican co-sponsors of H.R. 8, and the 8, by the way, which eventually voted for the bill, the piece goes on to note that for Republicans from so-called moderate suburban districts, NRA support is increasingly becoming a liability. Now, effectively acting as the Democrat Party whip, and that's the chamber member who whips votes for his or her party, we now have the new self-proclaimed boss of the Democrat Party, who some call AOC, but whom I have dubbed AIC for Alexandria Idiot Communist, who recently threatened primaries for Democrats who supported a Republican-led amendment to H.R. 8, which would have required notifying Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, anytime an illegal alien tried to buy a gun. That's probably the only reasonable thing in that bill. Now, said the Washington Post, quote, at a closed-door meeting of House Democrats on Thursday, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, God help us, said some of her colleagues could find themselves, quote, on a list, the list, of primary election targets after they voted for a Republican amendment requiring that undocumented immigrants, say that, illegal aliens, please, who try to buy guns could be reported to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, according to people in the room who are not authorized to comment publicly. The Post went on to discuss pushback from so-called moderate Democrats, an oxymoron if ever I heard one, and the Post noted, and I quote, a November Gallup poll found a pragmatic streak in the party. 54% of Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents wanted the party to become more moderate, while only 41% wanted it to become more liberal. Think about that. 41% wanted to become more liberal than they've been recently. That is a scary thought. That contrasted with the Republicans and their allies, 57% of whom wanted a more conservative party. Listen, Republicans, the majority wants you to be more conservative. Of course, according to The Hill, Ocasio-Cortez denied making threats in a tweet on Friday, but warned that Democrat defectors were, quote, inadvertently making a list of targets for the GOP and for progressive advocates by voting against Republicans. Now, how voting against leftists might make so-called centrist Democrats more vulnerable to the GOP isn't entirely clear, but then neither is anything else that Ocasio-Cortez ever claims. In any case, don't expect the so-called centrists of the Democrat Party to hold sway on guns, and don't expect those supposed splits in the Democrat Party to save you. If I credit the Democrats with anything, it is their ability to march in lockstep despite internal differences. One might credit it to discipline, I suppose, but personally, I think liberals are largely incapable of independent thought. Theirs is a herd mentality which regurgitates whatever pablum they've been fed. In liberal orthodoxy, independent thought is not only not encouraged, it is actively punished, as we have recently seen when a few dared to deviate from the playbook on things like the Me Too movement, causing the left to eat their own. And I do love it when they do, but anyways. But it makes the left more politically effective than conservatives, this unity, that is. Conservatives who are so fiercely independent that they can't seem to agree on what to order for lunch, much less which issues to support. Take it from me. In 2013, another gentleman and I put together a coalition of 39, count them 39, state and federal organizations, all dedicated to the principle that we would not compromise on the Senate background check bill S-649. That coalition was largely responsible for forcing the NRA to back away from the so-called Toomey Manchin compromise, and when they did so, the bill went down in flames. But here's my point. By the time I was done trying to get 39 gun rights leaders to agree on anything, I called myself the cat herder in chief. So the problem we face is that conservatives are independent thinkers, liberals subscribe to a herd mentality, and consequently, you will never see Democrats deviate from their playbook. That is, unfortunately, why education doesn't work for Democrat politicians, and why even those who might be prone to support us will invariably be drawn to the dark side, in some cases be forced to the dark side by their party leadership. I once had Democrat sponsors for our bills, people like Senator Scott Thomas, Representative Pryor Gibson, or Senator Doug Berger. No more. And frankly, absent contrary evidence, I have largely given up on the possibility of finding such people in the Democrat Party. Even if they are prone to support us, their leadership won't let them. Every bill that they would introduce will die if they support our cause. In a moment, we're going to take a short break, but first I want you to grab a pen and a piece of paper because there are two politicians I want you to call. Now that H.R. 8 and H.R. 1112 have cleared the United States House, they head for the U.S. Senate. You might think that the Republican-led Senate will stop these bills, but don't be so certain. We will discuss more in the next segment, but our U.S. Senators, Richard Burr and Thom Tillis, are by no means entirely solid on gun rights. As you probably know, you are represented by two United States Senators, so I need you to contact both of them. Therefore, I need to make the call ASAP, so write down the following phone numbers. All the area codes, by the way, are 202. Both phone numbers are a 202 area code. Call Senator Richard Burr at 224-3154. Again, that is 224-3154. 224-3154. For Senator Thom Tillis, call 224-6342. Again, 224-6342. 224-6342. What I need you to tell them is that as a North Carolina voter, you expect them to stop all gun control. Don't worry if you don't remember the bill numbers. Tell them to stop all gun control. We will repeat those numbers at the next segment of the show. But the bottom line is that limousine liberals like Michael Bloomberg, who want to control you and who might have the money, but we have the grassroots. We have you. That means you must call these United States senators and tell them to stop gun control. Richard Burr, 224-3154, 224-3154, and Thom Tillis, 224-6342, 224-6342. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. After our break, we will return with still more on the changing political dynamics of federal gun control and what it means for your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. We have been talking about the change in political dynamics which have unified the Democrat Party against gun rights and made the issue politically viable for the first time in more than 2 decades, including the fact that all declared Democrat candidates for the presidential race thus far are violently anti-gun. Before we get on to discuss the dynamics, though, I want to mention something I forgot in a previous segment. H.R. 1112, which supposedly gives the FBI up to 10 days for a background check, also contains a provision which nobody is talking about. And that provision would change the definition of people who are prohibited from buying firearms. People who were previously described as mental defectives would now be described as people having a mental illness. The way they do it effectively removes prior restrictions. It actually removes the provision where that person would have had to have been a danger to self or others, or adjudicated in some other way as mentally incompetent. It takes that language out, potentially exposing anybody who's been adjudicated by any board, court, commission, or other lawful authority, which is not just a court. Anybody who's received one of those diagnoses as having a mental illness could now be prohibited from buying guns under this bill, dramatically expanding the scope of 18 U.S. Code Section 922 and prohibited persons. Very dangerous. Now, as we began to discuss in our last segment, the word from Democrats is that they aren't yet done on gun control, with more likely to surface in June. The publication Roll Call notes the following, and I quote, House Democrats took a victory lap this week as their new majority passed 2 priority gun control measures that the previous Republican majority had blocked for years, but they appear to be in no rush to pass more. Yes, but not immediately. Yes, not immediately, but in this session, Judiciary Chairman Gerald Nadler told Roll Call on Thursday when asked if his panel would be marking up more legislation designed to prevent gun violence. Not that any of this actually prevents gun violence, but that's another matter. Not immediately, the New York Democrats said, is likely after June sometime. Nadler's remarks came after the House on Thursday passed 228 to 198 legislation that would extend from 3 days to 10 days the time for the government to complete a background check on someone who's trying to buy a gun from a licensed dealer before the sale can go through. House Majority Whip James E. Clyburn has been introducing the measure to address what's known as the Charleston loophole since the 2015 mass shooting there at a South Carolina church that left 9 dead. The gunman, Dylan Roof, was able to purchase a firearm even though his background check had not been approved because the FBI needed more time beyond the legal 3-day window. A day earlier, the House passed a bill that would expand the background check process to include purchases made at gun shows, online, or in other private settings, not just at licensed dealers. That vote was 240 to 190. California Representative Mike Thompson, the sponsor of that earlier measure, said the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force that he chairs will continue to look at other legislative solutions. Oh, I can't wait. But he had no immediate timing in mind for advancing more bills. Quote, a lot of people have a lot of ideas. We're looking at them all. If good ones are there, we'll do everything we can to get them to the forefront, he said. For example, Thompson noted that he has a bill that would require the FBI to alert local law enforcement when someone who tries to buy a gun fails a background check. He also said he'd support legislation to implement red flag laws, here we go again, that would allow police or family members to petition courts to temporarily remove firearms for people who pose a threat to themselves or others. Now here, allow me to interject. The danger of red flag laws is they deny you due process. You don't get a day in court. You don't even get to know what's happening before the police show up at your door to confiscate your firearms. And I go on with the article. Those are just several of the dozens of gun violence prevention bills Democrats have introduced, primarily reintroduced since the start of the 116th Congress. Other proposals include raising the age at which someone can purchase an assault rifle. They can't purchase an assault rifle. That's a machine gun, so that's incorrect. And banning bump stocks, devices that can be attached to semi-automatic weapons so they fire at the rate of a machine gun. Representative Dina Titus acknowledged last month that some proposals may take longer to pass than others. The Nevada Democrat represents parts of Las Vegas where in 2017 a gunman equipped his rifles with bump stocks to rapidly fire at attendees of a country music concert, killing 58 people. Quote, and I want you to listen to this because this is where they tell you the truth. You start with those that you are most likely to get support from across the aisle, and you build to things that people consider more extreme, like bans, she told Roll Call in January. Advance toward bans. Anybody who doesn't think that gun control is an incremental agenda is fooling themselves. Now, in our last segment, I mentioned that Senators Richard Burr and Thom Tillis might not be your best friends in getting the United States Senate to stop the gun control bills passed last week by the U.S. House. Perhaps a bit of history is in order, especially for those who are just joining us. Are you really so sure the U.S. Senate will stop this bill? Again, in 2013, the Senate voted for cloture. That is a motion to debate a bill requiring not 50 but 60 votes for Senate Bill 649, which is essentially the same bill as H.R. 8. Moreover, our own Republican Senator Richard Burr voted for cloture, that is, to debate the bill rather than simply killing it. And that was after signing onto a letter authored by Senators Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Mike Lee, saying they would not vote for cloture. Burr changed his mind and voted for cloture, making it possible for anti-gun politicians to debate and quite possibly pass the bill. I know this because Vernon Robinson and I put a demonstration on the front step of his Winston-Salem district office that allowed a few dozen angry voters a redress of grievances with their United States Senator. And as I said, I'm afraid I have never been on the Senator's favorites list ever since. The point is that rhinos are forever looking for ways to be reasonable on gun control. And I can assure you that from experience, I know that our own Thom Tillis, the other United States Senator representing North Carolina, is also no friend of gun owners. Tillis and I go way back to when he was Speaker of the North Carolina House. We were trying to pass restaurant carry, concealed carry in premises, in restaurants with on-premises alcohol consumption permits, provided the permit holder is not imbibing alcohol, and that was part of a larger bill. Tillis gave marching orders to one of his boys to strip out restaurant carry in committee. He then sent the now gutless bill to the House floor. Only when we, and that's Grassroots North Carolina, and Representative Larry Pittman of Cabarrus County, only when we threatened a floor fight to return the measure to the bill, a floor fight Tillis would likely have lost, only then did the Speaker agree to move restaurant carry in another bill. But even then, the bill that passed the House was relatively gutless and was improved to include campus carry and other measures only by Senator Buck Newton when the bill hit his chamber. The resulting bill was House Bill 937, which removed many of the earlier restrictions on concealed carry. But back to Tillis. As HB 937 came from the Senate, it also included a repeal of our Jim Crow-era pistol purchase permit law, which would have removed sheriff obstructions from the process of buying handguns and relied instead entirely on point-of-sale background checks, just as nearly all other states do. But the North Carolina Sheriff's Association, which wanted to keep money and power for its sheriffs, whispered into the ear of then-Governor and still Rhino, Pat McCrory, who promptly threatened to veto the bill if it continued to have the purchase permit repeal. Ignoring that the General Assembly had enough votes to override a gubernatorial veto, when the bill moved from the Senate back to the House, it needed a concurrence vote because it was not exactly the same bill. But not Tillis. Oh, no. He already has his sights on a U.S. Senate seat. He wanted to be a United States Senator, and he was not about to cross the governor, however weak-kneed such governor might be. So over our vociferous objections, Tillis tried to bury the bill. We only convinced him in less than pleasant terms that if he killed the bill, we would make a personal mission out of his U.S. Senate bid, and only then did he move the bill without the purchase permit provision. Translated, we still have the archaic permit law, which sheriffs routinely use to obstruct lawful gun purchases, thanks to Senator Thom Tillis. Do you trust this guy to stop gun control? Again, call Richard Burr, 224-3154, 224-3154. Call Thom Tillis at 224-6342, 224-6342. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m. we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. Please check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop at HyattGuns.com. I also encourage you to check out my website, gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, where you can find my earlier writings and editions of the show. See you next Sunday at 5.